At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? My name's Carol. Let's begin. The Vitrizian executive vibrated a trio of metallic studs on his breathing apparatus, a dry, chittering rattle. Armitage Kane, Manny to his friends, and a far more colorful list of things to his rivals, kept his expression neutral, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. The transport lanes through the Vol Gap are fixed terms, Administrator, Kane said, his smooth baritone carrying across the opulent negotiation suite. Omnigen requires unimpeded access. Your conglomerate's exclusive contract is, shall we say, an impediment. A towering being in an articulated pressure suit of polished hematite, its helmet a smooth, featureless curve, shifted its mass. Within, a form swam in amber fluid. Unprecedented. The Ascendancy Charter guaranteed our rights. Charters change. Markets evolve. Kane leaned forward, the crease in his trousers remaining a perfect line. Look at it this way. You grant us priority access, and in return, Omnigen grants you continued existence. It's a generous offer. I even managed to get our board to approve a 30% buyout premium for your shareholders. A golden parachute. The Vitrizian understood the threat. Kane knew it. A low hum from his suit's vocalizer was his only reply. The data chip is ready. A broad smile formed on Kane's face. A pleasure doing business with you. He collected the chip, gave a slight bow, and turned. The tension bled out of him, leaving a familiar vacancy. The verbal sparring, the moment of capitulation, it was all fleeting. Now came the paperwork, the reports, the syncopantic congratulations, the rest of his life. He strode from the suite and into the orbital station's corridor. Polished alloy reflected his image, a man in a sharp suit, his smile a geometric curve. He needed a new challenge, something with more texture. He chose the service corridor, a shortcut he'd mapped on his first day. The route offered a direct path, bypassing the station's cloying main concourse crowds. The route was also, he noted, deserted. A familiar thrum of anticipation started in his chest. 3 figures blocked the far end. One was enormous, an ursine creature with thick, gray hide and the coiled power of a hydrostatic muscle. One was a wiry avian, its head darting with nervous energy, its dark eyes focusing independently. The last was a squat, broad being of mottled blue skin, with the dense build of a hydraulic press. Kane stopped. He took in the 3 figures. Leader, tech, muscle. A classic configuration. The large one, the ursine brute, stepped forward. He opened his heavy jaw, revealing rows of flat, grinding teeth.
Armitage Kane, you're coming with us.
Am I? Kane asked, his tone mild. My schedule is clear.
The appointment is now,
the creature growled. The thin one fumbled with a device, a hypospray injector, the fine down on his neck damp with sweat. The blue one remained motionless, flaccid and immense. Kane considered his options. He could trigger the silent alarm in his watch. An Omnigen security team would be there in 90 seconds. He could activate the emergency transponder in his cufflink. He could fight. But where was the fun in that? A little predictable, yes? Kane said. The old maintenance corridor routine. Classic, I'll grant you, but it lacks a certain originality. The leader, Grull, paused, his jaw slack.
Just shut up and...
Kane let his briefcase slip. It clattered on the metal deck, its contents spilling. A flex screen, a handful of platinum credit chits, a silver pen. The 3 aliens flinched at the noise, their attention momentarily diverted. He pressed a stud on his cufflink. A camouflaged lens extended and retracted as it scanned for local broadcast IDs. A single, unflagged freighter signature appeared. GR499B. He mentally filed it away. Information was leverage. The thin one, Chur, got the injector working and lunged forward. Kane stood his ground and held out his arm, offering it. The avian halted, the injector wavering in his grip. "Easy now," Kane said. "Try to avoid missing the vein. It's a devil to clean this synth silk." Chur jabbed the needle into his arm. A pleasant warmth spread through him. Consciousness dissolved as a rough hand patted him down, pulling his personal comm unit from an inside pocket. He woke strapped to a metal chair in a converted cargo hold. The lighting was stark, the walls scarred with old impacts. Grohl, the ursine brute, stood before him, crossing his arms over his massive chest. A nervous twitch in his heavy jaw undercut the effect. The gangly avian Chur was at a console, his quick eyes flicking between a display of Kane's vital signs and Kane himself. The squat blue Borith, Boole, stood guard by the door, his large, dark eyes fixed on Kane. Kane tested his bonds. Metal cuffs, locked electronically. He subtly twisted his left wrist, pressing the cuff against the chair's armrest. Inside his cufflink, a micro nozzle released a bead of corrosive solvent. It dissolved the lock's polymer internal mechanism. The feedback was a faint warmth against his skin. Cheap. Commercial-grade K-series lock. Prone to chemical compromise. He filed the information away.
"Awake, human?"
Grohl's voice was gravel.
"Good. This can be simple. That chip the administrator handed you was just for appearances. He wants the real codes, the ones you have. You give us the access codes to Omnigen's acquisition plans for the Vetrizian shipping conglomerate. We receive our payment, and you get to live."
Kane looked around the hold. A small table was laden with an assortment of implements. A laser scalpel, a set of clamps, and a menacing device with a crown of metal needles connected by thick cables to a power unit lay on a small table. "Or?" Kane prompted, a smile touching his lips.
"Or we use these,"
Grohl said, gesturing to the implements.
"We will extract the information. The process will be unpleasant."
Unpleasant is so subjective, yes? Kane shifted in the chair, settling his weight. "I'm happy to talk. I'm a great conversationalist. But before we get into the dreary corporate espionage, I'm more interested in your hardware. What are we working with here?" He nodded toward the needle crown device. "That one looks particularly interesting. Synaptic feedback induction, or just a glorified cattle prod?" Grohl stared at him. Chur swiveled his head, both eyes pointing directly at Kane. Boole gave a slow blink. "Let's move past the psychological games," Kane continued, his voice bright with curiosity. "It's so tedious. Threats, manipulations. It's what I do for a living. Let's get to the fun part." The request hung in the cargo hold. Grohl's posture sagged. He stared at the human, his jaw hanging open. Grohl gaped at the human. The smile on the man's face was genuine. A cold dread, colder than any weapon, settled in Grohl's guts. The manual for human interrogation, a flimsy pamphlet he bought on a disreputable data market, had covered psychological resilience. It made no mention of enthusiasm.
What did he say?"
Grohl managed, his voice a hoarse whisper.
"He appears to be requesting pain-inducing stimuli,"
Chur chirped, his voice a high-pitched wire.
"His vitals have elevated, but It's presenting as anticipatory excitement instead of fear. This is anomalous.
Grohl shook his head to clear it. He pointed a thick, heavy finger at the device on the table.
That, he growled, is a Mark IV synaptic agonizer. It simulates every pain receptor in your brain directly.
The human's expression brightened. Oh, exquisite. Sensation, sparing the flesh from damage. Elegant. Well, what are you waiting for? Sweat trickled down Grohl's armored hide.
Chur. Low setting.
Chur's slender digits danced over a control panel.
Activating now.
The crown of needles on the device hummed. Kane's body stiffened in the chair. A low gasp escaped his lips. His vital signs on Chur's monitor spiked. A grim smile tightened Grohl's lips.
The codes, human.
Kane lulled his head back. He closed his eyes, the lines of his face softening. Oh, that's interesting. A bit diffuse, though. Like a low-grade fever blooming under the skin. Can you turn it up? The smile left Grohl's face.
What?
Turn it up, Kane repeated, his voice breathy. And maybe focus the array. Are the nerve pathways individually targetable? You're just giving me a dull, all-over ache. It's sloppy work. Chur looked at Grohl, his eyes widened, their independent focus locking onto Kane.
He's critiquing the device's performance.
I heard him!
Grohl snapped. He strode over to the human, leaning in close.
This is more than a game. Give me the codes.
Kane opened his eyes. They were clear and focused, catching the stark light. It's always a game, and you're playing it poorly. For instance, if you want to get a reaction, you should try isolating the trigeminal nerve. The signal pathway is immense. Or, if you want to get creative, a sequential pulse through the brachial plexus. It creates the most fascinating sensation of your arm being on fire and dipped in ice at the same time. He paused, considering. You'll need to modify the emitter coils to get that kind of focused effect, of course. Your current setup is far too crude. Chur made a small, strangled noise.
Modify the... He's suggesting design improvements for a torture device, while the device tortures him.
Buell, who watched from the door, tilted his large head. The talkie man is helpful? Grohl felt a hot pressure build in his thick neck. As a professional, he had a reputation. Admittedly, a small and slightly tarnished one, but a reputation nonetheless.
The codes!
His roar echoed in the hold. Kane laughed, a rich, genuine sound that echoed in the metal holds. Why would I give them to you? This is infinitely more interesting than my last quarterly performance review. Besides, this whole operation has the stink of desperation, my friend. Kane's expression hardened, his playful tone giving way to the clipped cadence of a boardroom negotiator. Let me guess. You're deep into someone unpleasant. A loan shark, probably. You took this job on a shoestring budget, correct? The client lowballed you, promised you an easy target, a soft corporate human. But he failed to do his homework, as did you. The words struck Grohl. It was all true. The debt to Gravemaw, the cheap contract from the slippery Vitrisian, the promise of an easy job.
Shut up,
Grohl whispered. You're out of your league, Kane said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. And the real problem isn't your business model.
You're undercapitalized. Your asset management is in shambles, and your branding is a void.
Grohl turned and stormed from the cargo hold, the human's laughter following him down the corridor. The Iron Leech's cramped cockpit smelled of burnt wiring. Grohl paced the short distance between the pilot's chair and the navigator's station, his heavy footfalls thudding on the deck plates.
He's bluffing,
Grohl muttered, more to convince himself than anyone else.
It's some kind of human defense mechanism, psychological. He's trying to get inside my head.
Schur, who had scurried back to the cockpit's relative safety, wrung his four-fingered hands.
Get inside your head? Grohl, he was giving me technical specifications. He reverse engineered the agonizer's function based on the sensation alone. He's functioning perfectly. His entire species is a design flaw.
They're just flesh and bone,
Grohl insisted, slamming a stony fist on the console. The console sparked in protest.
There has to be a weakness.
The cockpit door hissed open, and Boole entered, his broad form filling the doorway. He held a small flex screen.
Is the talkie man okay?
Boole rumbled.
He seemed happy. He is resisting,
Grohl roared.
He was helpful,
Boole said, looking at his flex screen.
He asked if the emergency restraints on this vessel had undergone stress testing to Ascendancy Regulation 12 Gamma. I told him I was unaware. He suggested I check the ship's maintenance manual.
Boole tapped the flex screen.
He was right. They are overdue for inspection by 70 hours. That is a serious safety violation.
Grohl stared at his muscle. Boole, the enforcer, now performed ship maintenance at the suggestion of their prisoner. Before he could formulate a response, the comms unit chirped. A shielded, high-priority channel. The client. Grohl clacked his jaw. He jabbed the receive button. The Vitrizian's holographic image flickered to life above the console. The smooth, polished hematite helmet of his suit seemed to absorb the grainy blue light. Report, Grohl. The Vitrizian synthesizer crackled. Do you have the data?
We have the assets,
Grohl stammered.
He is proving more resilient than anticipated.
Resilient? The audio from the Vitrizian's vocalizer crackled with static. He is a human, a species known for its fragile biology and irrational emotional states. Your incompetence is testing my patience.
We just need more time,
Grohl pleaded. Time is a luxury you lack, the Vitrizian hissed. Every moment you waste, Omnigen's plan moves closer to fruition. My other asset is already moving into position, mercenary. Give me a reason to keep them leashed. They are far more expensive than you, and they are intolerant of loose ends. The transmission cut out, leaving Grohl in the cockpit's sudden silence. Gravemaw wanted his credits. The Vitrizian wanted his data. And the human in the cargo hold wanted to discuss the optimal voltage for nerve stimulation. A chill prickled Grohl's hide. His thoughts returned to the smiling man strapped to a chair one deck below. That image pushed out the threats from his client and his creditor. Their next attempt was sleep deprivation. The plan was simple: keep the human awake until his mind broke from sheer exhaustion. As an added measure, Schur piped in a continuous loop of traditional Quell ceremonial music, a cacophony of high-pitched clicks, wet gurgles, and a tonal buzzing. Kane sat in the darkness, the strange music a soothing counterpoint to the distant, worried muttering of his captors.
It reminded him of a minimalist electronic album he'd enjoyed a few years back. After 6 hours, Grohl came in, his heavy form slumping. His eyes were bloodshot.
"The codes,"
He grunted, his words slurring slightly.
"Grohl, you look terrible," Kane said. "You're getting insufficient rest. That is a poor way to run an organization. A leader needs to be sharp. You're letting the stress get to you." Grohl just stared at him. "Let's talk about your business,"
Kane continued, his voice energetic and crisp. He'd pulled 72-hour shifts during hostile takeovers, fueled only by stimulants and spite.
"Your branding, for instance, it's all wrong. Grohl's Marauders." He clicked his tongue. "It's too aggressive. It screams small-time thug for hire. You will fail to attract high-value corporate clients with a name like that." "We avoid attracting," Grohl started, then trailed off, too tired to argue. "You should be," Kane insisted. "You need to pivot. Rebrand. Think corporate synergy. Something approachable yet professional. Like, Grohl's Discrete Solutions. See? It implies subtlety, skill. It suggests you solve problems. You solve them instead of just smashing them." Grohl rubbed his temples, a headache forming behind his eyes. Kane continued. He turned his attention to Chur, who was hovering in the doorway. "And your tech. Chur. Your ship's systems are a disgrace. The life support is inefficient, the power fluctuations are frankly dangerous, and this music..." He paused. "The music is fine, but everything else needs an overhaul. I've noticed a persistent flicker in the corridor lighting. That suggests a power regulation issue. You're bleeding energy somewhere, and in a ship this old, that's a fire hazard." Chur widened his eyes. The systems are fine," Chur retorted, his voice a high-pitched squeak. "I've optimized them myself. The reactor's age considered, the power grid is perfectly stable. The flicker is a known issue with the junction box in the aft corridor, but it's completely harmless." "Harmless?" Kane raised an eyebrow. "A power fluctuation is always a symptom. It speaks to a deeper problem. Unshielded conduits, maybe? Bad insulation?" "The insulation is up to code," Chur screeched. "Except for the dangerously unshielded primary power conduits in the main corridor, but that's a design flaw. It would require a full dry dock overhaul to fix." Chur froze. He clapped his hands to his beak, his eyes swiveling wildly. He'd just revealed a critical ship vulnerability to their prisoner. Kane gave a small, satisfied smile. He filed the information away. Unshielded primary power conduits. Main corridor. Grohl just groaned and slumped against the wall. Far from the Iron Leech's dingy confines, a different kind of predator slipped through the black. The Nightfall was a blade of a ship, all knife-edge geometry and matte, light-absorbing plating. It dropped out of FTL with a minimal ripple in space-time, a ghost appearing in the asteroid field, where Grohl's ship lay hidden. Inside, the silent bridge held only the soft chime of consoles. Scrubbers filtered the air to absolute neutrality. At its center stood Commander Shyla. She was a core, a tall, slender species with an avian ancestry, evident in the subtle patterns of her gray skin and the unnerving stillness of her large, dark eyes. Her movements were spare and direct. "Report," she said, her voice low and even. "Target's energy signature detected, Commander," an operator replied, his focus fixed on his console. "Weak, but it's there. Tucked inside a dense cluster, just as the client's intel suggested. They're running cold to mask their output." "Amateurs,"
Shyla said. The word was a statement of fact. Life signs? 3 kidnappers and 1 human. He's alive. Vitals are irregular but stable. They're trying to soften him up, Shyla surmised. They'll fail. The client's profile in Armitage Kane suggests standard coercion techniques would bounce off him. Her client, the same impatient Vitrisian, had provided a much more detailed and expensive intelligence file than the one he'd given Grohl. She turned to her team, 4 other core warriors clad in sleek, black combat armor. They stood with perfect stillness, their pulse rifles held at a low ready. Mission parameters remain the same, Shyla stated, sweeping her gaze over them. We retrieve the asset and the corporate data he carries. The client wants the kidnappers eliminated as a loose end. We will perform a stealth breach at the aft airlock. Expect haphazard resistance and to execute accordingly. Move out. The team gave a single, sharp nod and filed from the bridge as a single unit, their steps silent. Shyla watched them go, her expression betraying nothing. Grohl had given up on cleverness. He was tired, a sharp pressure built behind his eyes, and his prisoner was still offering unsolicited advice on market penetration strategies. He fell back on the most basic tool in his arsenal, brute force. He shoved Boole into the cargo hold. Rough him up, Grohl ordered, his voice flat. Avoid killing him, just make him hurt. Boole looked from Grohl's weary face to the smiling human in the chair. The talkie man was polite. He'd helped him with the maintenance schedule. Boss? Boole rumbled, his external gills fluttering. Why? Because I said so, Grohl snapped, then retreated from the hold, turning away. Boole turned to Kane. He shuffled his wide feet. His build was a solid block of muscle, and his nature was gentle. He reached out a thick, 3-fingered hand and lightly prodded Kane in the shoulder. Kane looked down at the point of contact, then back up at Boole, his eyebrows raised. Is that it? He asked. Boole, I'm insulted. I've had turbulence on commercial flights that was more violent than that. Come on, big guy. Put your back into it. Boole blinked. He prodded again, a little harder. Warmer, Kane encouraged. But you're unfocused. All that muscle and you're just poking. Your technique is lacking. He strained against his bonds slightly. Look, the straps are a bit loose. You could get a much better angle on my ribs if you came from the side. Oh, wait. Try the pressure point just below the floating rib. It's a real zinger. A little to the left. You're getting close. Kane sighed. This is taking forever. Here, let me just guide your hand. He shifted his torso as much as he could. Right there. That spot. Just a good, solid jab. Go on. Poke me here. Boole stared from the spot Kane indicated on his own hand, then back at Kane's encouraging face. The request was so earnest, so helpful. Hurting someone who was actively trying to help you get it right felt like a fundamental contradiction. He dropped his hand and stepped back, shaking his large blue head. I am unable, Boole rumbled. The talkie man is too helpful. It feels wrong. He turned and shuffled from the cargo hold, leaving Kane alone. From the corridor, Kane heard Grohl let out a long, agonized cry. The sound was deeply satisfying. Grohl was out of options. Physical intimidation had failed. Psychological tactics had backfired spectacularly. His crew was falling apart. He cornered Chur in the cockpit, his massive frame coiled with tension. Find me a weakness, Grohl commanded,
his voice a low, dangerous growl.
Anything. Search the galactic net. There has to be something humans fear, some phobia we can use.
I've tried, Chur whined, his head feathers drooping. The standard databases are useless. They list common biological vulnerabilities, toxins, atmospheric deprivation, kinetic trauma. We've established he's receptive to kinetic trauma.
Dig deeper,
Grull roared, slamming his fist on the bulkhead next to Chur's head. The avian flinched violently.
Go past the official Ascendancy encyclopedias. Find their raw data, their own networks. There has to be something in there.
Chur's forefingers keyed in search parameters. He dove into the galactic net's murky depths, past the firewalls and the sanitized official channels. He bypassed security warnings and content filters, searching for any repository of human data, regardless of obscurity. And then, he found it. A huge file, flagged with dozens of warnings that he ignored in haste. It lay buried on an old academic server, a relic from the First Contact era. Terran Cultural Exchange data packets, uncurated. It sounded official and comprehensive. Perfect. I found something, Chur announced, his voice steady for the first time. A primary source archive. It's massive.
Download all of it,
Grull ordered.
and find me something I can use to break that smiling monster in my hold.
Chur initiated the download, bypassing the ship's final security protocols to speed up the transfer. The progress bar filled. The file unpacked itself into Chur's console like a data tsunami. It was a chaotic, unfiltered mess. The human ID's digital core sample. He started clicking, and the abyss started staring back. The first layer was merely confusing. He found forums discussing something called BDSM, full of arcane terminology and diagrams that made his head spin. Images appeared of humans with bizarre body modifications. Split tongues, subdermal implants, elaborate tattoos that covered their entire bodies. He read articles about extreme sports, watching helmet camera footage of people throwing themselves off cliffs with only a sheet of fabric to save them. He filed it under human resilience. Then he followed a link, and another. The rabbit hole deepened. He discovered furry conventions. Thousands of humans dressing up in elaborate, full-body costumes of terrestrial animals, adopting new personas, interacting in ways that defied his understanding. Why would a creature with self-awareness purposefully encase itself in the skin of a lesser beast? He stumbled into the world of fan fiction. He found sprawling epics about the romantic pairings of characters from children's cartoons. The volume was staggering. Millions upon millions of words dedicated to fictional relationships and fictional universes. He found the political forums. The rage, the vitriol, the absolute, unshakable certainty of 1,000 competing ideologies screamed at him from the screen. Conspiracy theories about flattened worlds and lizard people, and faked moon landings that were so labyrinthine and self-contradictory, they defied any form of logic. Memes, bizarre combinations of image and text meant for humor. Logic and order frayed in his mind. The chaos was too much. The patterns too random. This was no culture. It was a collective fever dream. And then he found the video. Its title was Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest Championship. He couldn't look away as a tiny human female stood before a mountain of food. A timer started, and she ate. She devoured tubes of processed meat stuffed into bread casings. Her whole body moved in a symphony of consumption, a blur of hands and mouth. Water, bread, meat, repeat. Chur watched her consume 70 of them in 10 minutes. 70! He did a quick calculation based on mass and volume. She had ingested nearly twice her own stomach's plausible capacity. The biological absurdity of competitive eating accomplished what voluntary pain, animal costumes, and political insanity had failed to do. It was the image of that small female, a champion of gluttony, her face smeared with condiments, raising a garish champion's belt. It was the sight of a species that had weaponized digestion for sport. A sound escaped Chur's throat. It started as a low whimper and escalated into a high-pitched, wailing shriek that echoed through the Iron Leech's cheap metal corridors. Grohl and Boole were in the ship's small galley, trying to choke down a nutrient broth that tasted of yeast and metal, when the shriek tore through the ship. It was a high, wavering sound. "Sure," Grohl said, dropping his broth packet. He and Boole lumbered toward the cockpit. They found Chur huddled under his console, rocking back and forth. He was muttering, his eyes spinning in opposite directions. "Endless bread tubes. They just keep coming. Creatures of absolute spite wearing the skins of animals. The world is flat and covered in mustard."
Chur! What is it? What happened?
Grohl grabbed the slender avian and hauled him back into his chair. Chur just pointed a trembling finger at his main monitor. Grohl looked. The screen was the data's cycling nightmare collage. A man with a tattooed face smiled out, his tongue forked like a serpent's. A politician with orange skin screamed silently at a rally. A group of people in wolf costumes were hugging. And then, for a brief moment, an image flashed up from a cooking show. It showed a human chef boiling a carapace sea dweller that looked disturbingly like a distant Borith cousin. Grohl's jaw snapped shut with a sharp crack. He lunged forward and slammed the monitor off, plunging the cockpit into near darkness. The images burned into his retinas. The job was a curse. The human was a demon.
"That's it,"
Grohl rasped.
It's over. We're done here."
He turned to Boole, who was looking at the catatonic Chur with sad, wide eyes.
"We're wiping Chur's short-term memory. It's the only kindness we can show him. Then we take the human to the nearest deserted asteroid, dump him, and we run. We run as far and as fast as this rust bucket can take us."
He'd lost the money. His debt to Gravemaw would come due. But survival was more important. Silence. The grating quell music had stopped. The anxious muttering from the corridor had ceased. The only sound was a faint, distant weeping. Kane smiled in the cargo hold's darkness. He waited a few minutes, letting the quiet settle. Then he called out, his voice cheerful. "Hello out there! Had a thought about your command structure? I think a flat hierarchy might improve communication between your team. Anyone want to workshop it?" Silence answered him. They had stopped paying attention to him. He subtly twisted his left wrist again, applying steady pressure. The solvent, having done its work on the polymer tumblers, had created a weakness. He focused, twisting harder, feeling the plastic groan. With a faint snap, the lock mechanism gave way. On the Nightfalls Bridge, Commander Shyla watched the Iron Leech's schematic. "Signal confirmed," the ops officer reported. "The human's transponder just activated. Brief, low-power burst. He's tagged the ship." Shyla processed the information. The asset was more than alive. He was active. Clever. He must have triggered a hidden beacon. "He knows we're coming," she murmured. "Or he's calling his own people. It is irrelevant." She traced the schematic with her eyes. "The amateurs are hiding. Internal comms chatter is silent. Life signs cluster in the forward section, except for the human in the aft cargo bay." She tapped a finger on the whole schematic.
Launch the boarding pod. Aft airlock, as planned. Slow burn on the breach cutter. I want to give them minimal warning. A dull thud, barely audible through the vacuum of space, announced the Nightfall's arrival. A sleek, matte black boarding pod clamped onto the Leech's hull with powerful magnetic locks. A circular laser deliberately sliced through the outer door. Time was on their side. Shyla hailed the target vessel on a wide, unencrypted frequency. Her calm, clear voice boomed through every speaker on the crippled freighter. This is Commander Shyla of the Nightfall. You are harboring an asset belonging to my client. Surrender him and the data you have failed to acquire. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding. Do this, and you may live. You have 1 minute to comply. It was a professional courtesy, a final formality before their elimination. Shyla's voice struck the Iron Leech's cockpit like a shockwave. The speakers, long unused for external comms, crackled with the unexpected signal. Commander Shyla of the Nightfall. Grawl froze. He recognized that name. Everyone in the mercenary trade knew that name. The Nightfall was an elite outfit. Killers. The highest caliber of professionals. His client's, quote, other asset. A chill seized Grawl. They'll kill us,
he whispered. Boole looked at him, his placid face for once showing concern. Chur continued to rock and mutter about bread tubes, oblivious. Growl's mind raced. Fight or surrender? Surrender meant spacing, as the Vitresian would ensure they never talked about his corporate sabotage. Fighting meant death, but it was the only option with a sliver of dignity. He grabbed his pulse rifle from the weapons locker. The heft of it was barely reassuring.
Boole, get your weapon,
he ordered, his voice trembling.
We make a stand.
Boole gave a slow nod and picked up his own heavy-bore rifle. He looked to Grawl for orders, his loyalty absolute. Grawl acted on instinct. The boarding pod's dull thud locking onto the hull shook the entire ship. Kane was already free when it happened. He stayed in the chair for a moment, rubbing his wrist. He listened. He could hear the faint whine of a laser cutter at the airlock down the hall. The panicked, heavy footsteps of Grawl and Boole announced their approach. He rose from the chair and moved silently to a small wall locker. It was flimsy, but it held what he needed. The crew's spare weapons. A standard-issue pulse rifle, 2 concussion grenades, and the portable power cell for the synaptic agonizer. He grinned. He ignored the rifle. He took the power cell and a grenade, tucking it into his suit jacket. The cargo hold door burst open. Grawl and Boole stumbled in, rifles raised, ready to secure their prisoner before making a final, suicidal stand. They stopped dead. Kane stood before them free, his suit immaculate, save for a few wrinkles. He held the agonizer's power cell in one hand. They stared, their weapons sagging. Before either of them could react, Kane spoke. Your client sent them to clean up, he said, his words sharp and targeted. They will kill you to tie up loose ends. Your only chance of survival is to put those rifles down and do exactly as I say. Now. Grawl and Boole exchanged a glance. They looked at the smiling, unbound human. Then, their gazes shifted back down the corridor toward the cutting laser's sound. Grawl hesitated, then lowered his rifle. They're professionals, Kane said, his voice cutting through Grall's paralysis. They'll come in fast and clear the main corridor. We will avoid fighting them. We're gonna let the ship do it for us. He paced the cargo hold. The human was now their field commander, laying out a battle plan. Your tech, sure? Kane said, glancing at Grawl.
He mentioned the primary power conduits in the main corridor are unshielded. We're going to use that.
The information filtered through Grohl's thoughts. He remembered Chur's panicked outburst. The human had filed it away.
How?
Grohl asked, his voice a hoarse croak.
Simple electrocution,
Kane said with a dismissive wave.
Their armor will have surge protection, but a raw, unconditioned dump from a ship's main power is an entirely other matter. It should overload their systems and stun them at least. He turned to Boole. Big guy, I need you to go to the engine room. Find something big and metal and start banging on the pipes. Make a lot of noise. They'll think you're trying a frantic last-ditch repair. It will draw their attention to the stern.
Boole nodded, his expression showing simple relief at receiving a clear, uncomplicated task. He lumbered off. Kane then looked at Grohl.
You are going to get on the comms and surrender. Tell Commander Shyla you'll open the main airlock. Be convincing. Sound terrified. It should prove simple enough.
The insult slid past him. Grohl nodded dumbly.
While your groveling distracts her,
Kane continued, leading Grohl from the cargo hold and down a side passage.
You and I are going to visit the corridor's primary junction box.
Chur, in his neurotic quest for efficiency, had left the main panel open, the cover leaning against the wall. Inside, a thick bundle of cables and bus bars pulsed with the ship's energy. Kane handed Grohl the synaptic agonizer's power cell. It had 2 long, insulated leads with sharp metal prongs.
When they're in the corridor, I'll give you a signal,
Kane said, his voice low. He pointed to 2 massive copper bus bars.
You will jam these leads directly onto those terminals. The cell's capacitor will act as a starter, creating a massive short circuit across the floor plates. Understand?
Grohl, holding the power cell intended for torturing this man, nodded again. He was a tool in the human's hand. Kane, meanwhile, found a loose ceiling panel above the corridor. With deft ease, he wedged the concussion grenade into the space, running the thin detonation wire into a service duct where he could easily reach it. He glanced at Grohl.
At my signal.
The outer airlock door fell inward with a heavy clang. Commander Shyla and her team moved through the opening in a tight, professional wedge. Darkness filled the ship's interior, broken only by the emergency lights and the tactical lamps on their rifles.
Clear, the point man whispered over their private comms.
They advanced down the main corridor. It was silent, except for a loud, rhythmic clanging coming from the engine room's direction. Sounds like they're trying to get their drive back online, Shyla's second-in-command noted.
Let them, Shyla said. It's irrelevant.
Her comms crackled. It was the ship's captain, Grohl. His voice was a panicked mess.
We surrender. Hold your fire. We've opened the airlock. We give up.
Acknowledged, Shyla said, her voice flat. She paid the plea little mind. Amateurs always broke. She and her team continued their steady advance down the corridor, their armored boots making soft, rhythmic sounds on the metal deck. They crossed the corridor's midpoint, a section of floor plating that was slightly more scuffed than the rest. From a service duct above, Kane watched them. He gave Grohl a sharp, single nod. Grohl, hidden in the side passage, jammed the power cell leads onto the bus bars. A blinding blue arc of energy erupted from the junction box. The entire corridor floor lit up with a corona of raw power. Every plate became a live conductor. The 4 core warriors in the corridor center seized up as thousands of amps surged through their armor. Systems shorted out with audible pops and fizzles. Their surge protectors were useless against the raw, brute force flood of electricity. They convulsed for a second, then dropped to the deck, unconscious and twitching amidst a shower of sparks. Shyla, at the formation's rear,
was just outside the main discharge zone. The feedback surge fried her comms and HUD, but her armor seals held, leaving her staggered but mobile. Her rifle came up. Hands moved with drilled instinct, scanning for the attack's source. Kane gave her no chance. He pulled the wire. The concussion grenade detonated with a deafening boom and a flash of incandescent white light. The charge was brutally effective in the contained space. Shyla cried out, momentarily deafened and blinded, stumbling back against the wall. Kane dropped from the ceiling duct, landing in a silent crouch. The air tasted of burnt electronics. The 4 core troopers were down, out of the fight. Shyla was on her knees, shaking her head, trying to clear the spots from her vision. She was tough. Her training was deep. Even disoriented, she reached for the sidearm holstered on her thigh. She drew it and fired, 2 wild shots that ricocheted harmlessly down the corridor. Kane sidestepped the blind spots. He closed the distance in 2 quick strides. His movements were small, targeted. He grabbed her weapon hand, twisting it at an unnatural angle. Bone grated. The pistol clattered to the floor. Shyla let out a sharp hiss of pain and tried to strike with her other hand. A vicious elbow aimed at his throat. Kane flowed with the movement, redirecting her arm, using her own momentum against her. He spun her around, forcing her into a painful joint lock that arched her back. She was strong, fighting him every step, but he controlled the points of leverage. He leaned in close to her ear, his voice a calm whisper against the ringing in her own. "You're good," he said. "Professional, but your timing is terrible." His thumb pressed into a nerve cluster at the base of her neck. Shyla's body went limp, her struggles ceasing instantly. She slumped to the floor, unconscious. Kane stood over her, breathing calmly. He straightened his tie, then he went to work. Grohl and Boole emerged from their respective hiding places, their eyes wide. The main corridor was a scene of utter devastation. 4 elite mercenaries lay twitching on the electrified floor, and their legendary commander was unconscious at Kane's feet. They stared at Kane, their fear giving way to profound awe. He was a corporate executive, and he was a trickster god of chaos and violence. "Move," Kane said. "The floor is safe now, but I would avoid licking it. Boole, you're strong. Help me tie these professionals up with their own restraints. They're much better than yours." Boole, ever obedient, did as instructed, helping Kane secure Shyla and her unconscious team. Once he had dealt with them, Kane turned his attention back to his original captors. He picked up a discarded pulse rifle. "Grohl, on your knees." Grohl complied immediately. "Sure, too." Boole carefully retrieved the still muttering Chur and placed him next to Grohl. Kane tied them both up, his knots sure and tight. He looked at Boole. For a moment, something in his expression softened. "Sorry, big guy," Kane said. "Witnesses." He picked up the synaptic agonizer, which Grohl had dropped. He adjusted the settings, turning the power down to a low, targeted level. He placed the crown on Boole's head. The big Borith looked at him with sad, accepting eyes. Kane activated the device for a single, brief pulse. Boole's eyes rolled back, and he slumped to the floor, unconscious. Kane tied him up as well. He surveyed his work. 2 full mercenary teams, neutralized and secured. The ship was his. He walked to the cockpit, a mess of flickering, dead screens. His personal comm unit sat on the navigator's console, discarded. He picked it up. It chirped to life, connecting to a priority Omnigen satellite network. A calm, female voice answered. "Executive Services." "Hi, it's Armitage Kane," he said, leaning against the corridor wall. "Yes, I'll need an executive extraction. My transponder is active, code GR499B. Rendezvous with it. Tell the pilot to be careful on approach. There's another ship in the area, but they appear indisposed. And could you please have a steak, medium rare, and a bottle of Antarian whiskey waiting for me? This has been a strange day. Grohl watched as Kane finished his call. The human straightened his suit, brushing off a speck of dust. He looked just as he had in the Vitrisian's negotiation suite. Kane walked over and looked down at him. His expression held only a detached amusement. "For what it's worth," Kane said, "your technique has potential, but your subject selection needs work. I'm leaving a review for you on the Mercnet. 3 stars, prompt service, enthusiastic staff, but the amenities are severely lacking." He then reached into his jacket and produced a small, encrypted data chip, the one from the Vitrisian. He placed it on Grohl's armored chest. "A tip," Kane said. "Blackmail material on your former employer. Use it to get your payment. An executive who hires kidnappers is a liability to everyone. Consider this a lesson in managing your business partners." Grohl stared at the chip, then back at Kane. A new proximity alert chimed through the ship. A moment later, a sleek Omnigen shuttle, all white plating and glowing blue engines, docked with the Leech's main airlock. The ramp lowered, revealing a pristine, brightly lit interior and a human attendant in a crisp uniform. Kane gave Grohl a final, parting nod. "Try rebranding," he said. "Discreet solutions. It has a ring to it." Then he turned and walked straight up the ramp into the shuttle. The ramp hissed shut, and a moment later, Grohl felt the shuttle undock. Darkness surrounded him, along with unconscious bodies, a catatonic tech, and the stark truth that he was just a minor character in Armitage Kane's exciting day. The whiskey was superb, with a peaty, smoky flavor that spoke of alien soil and careful aging. Kane swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the shuttle's gentle hum a counterpoint to the day's chaos. On the large view screen before him, the face of his superior, Executive Director Corina Celine, regarded him with a cool, appraising stare. "Let me be clear, Armitage," she said, her voice holding a sharp edge. "A rival's asset abducted you and held you on their ship, and you are now telling me you escaped, and also single-handedly neutralized the kidnappers and a high-tier recovery team from the Nightfall?" "That's the gist of it," Kane said, taking a sip of whiskey. "I gave a more detailed, though heavily redacted, report to your aide. I may have left out the part where I gave them pointers on their interrogation methods. I felt it might complicate the paperwork." Celine's severe expression cracked for a fraction of a second, the ghost of a smile. "You protected the company's secrets. You prevented the Vitrisian takeover from compromise, and you took one of the most feared mercenary outfits in the sector off the board. The board is pleased." "I live to serve," Kane said dryly. "Effective immediately, I am promoting you," Celine continued. "Senior Vice President of Counterintelligence and Special Acquisitions. We feel we underutilize your unique skill set in standard negotiations." Kane grinned. "I accept. Sounds like it has potential." "See that you continue to impress me, Armitage." The call ended. Kane leaned back in his plush leather seat. The shuttle attendant approached him silently. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Kane?" the attendant asked. "Your steak will be ready shortly." Kane looked at the attendant, a new idea taking shape. "Yes," he said, his grin widening. "Connect me with research and development. After my recent field experience, I have some notes on improving our personal restraint systems. They underwent vigorous testing." The attendant blinked. Kane just swirled his whiskey.
the thrill of the win already fading, replaced by anticipation for the next challenge.